Welcome to Future Forward, a podcast where we share AI insights, one expert at a time. I'll be talking to experts from various backgrounds, ranging from academia to startups, scale-ups, and corporates. Welcome. I'm here with Philippe De Ridder, CEO and co-founder at the Board of Innovation. Hi, Philippe. How are you?
Hey, Davio. I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You just told me you were a bit tired. You had a rough night?
A couple. I've been to Sweden for the weekend with friends, so a couple of shorter nights and traveling to our New York office as well last week. But all ready for the podcast.
Right, cool. Nice. So maybe just to start off a bit, because now you're deep into AI and innovation, but we'll come to that in a second. Do you have anything in the past that you've done with AI? Do you have a past with AI? Do you have an interest? Is there anything that you can share?
Yeah, I've always had an interest and maybe, just explaining a little bit what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So with Board of Innovation, we're an innovation firm, meaning that we invent new products for our clients.
I've applied once, by the way.
Yes, you keep on remembering me about that.
So you didn't hire me?
Yes, you keep on telling me as well. Sorry for that. We clearly made a mistake. Also, we work with Fortune 500 companies on inventing their next generation of products. So with the likes of Nestle, Walmart, Roche, Siemens, etc. And within that, for the last 5 years, I've had the vision that work in terms of new product development, imagining those products, developing them and bringing them to market, that would become automated with AI. So it's been on my mind for, let's say, the last 5 years. I don't have a technical background myself, so I look at it from a business and societal point of view. So hold off on all the technical questions for today.
Because you say you saw it coming, or you saw it coming, you expected, you were hoping for it. Because I'm and that's maybe good why you didn't hire me. I'm clearly not the expert in the innovation process. Why did you expect that something, or why did you see something would happen there?
My expectation was because a lot of that process is repeatable in a way, especially in consumer goods. For example, with Nestle, we've developed 15 new products together. So that's food and drinks that we drink and eat on a daily basis, just to make it very tangible. And those companies, they develop and launch hundreds of new products every year across the whole world. And a lot of those tasks and steps in that process are as such repeatable. So I just saw the potential to automate that and to develop that into a more autonomous innovation process.
Which is basically what you're aiming at today?
Yes, so that's since the last year, with obviously the technology breakthroughs that we've had with all the LLMs and everything we've seen over the last year. The vision that we formulated around it is what we call autonomous innovation. And that's now what I've been primarily working on over the last year with our clients, and also where we've organized a big summit around called the Autonomous Innovation Summit in December, which we're reorganizing in June, and where we've gathered over 10,000 people, 50 plus speakers. So that's something that I'm doing as well next to Board of Innovation.
Yeah, it's a great summit, by the way. You call it autonomous innovation, which is what we often see, clients and people in general. The autonomous word is a bit the scary part often, because which GitHub started and Microsoft took over the Copilot story, which is a lot more, okay, you are a person and you have a friend that helps you. You're clearly going for autonomous. Why and do you hear the same questions as well, and the risks, like, oh, will it take over our innovation?
Well, there's definitely those questions and concerns, but I think we would all have them. If you haven't had an existential crisis right now around AI, then probably you haven't gotten really into it just yet. I think that's part of the discovery process, and probably a good indicator if you're already gotten into it. In terms of why we're going for autonomous innovation as the future vision, because we're convinced or at least confident. Nobody knows what the future will bring, but that's where we will be trending towards. And in general, our future vision on the world, or mine, is that our world will become more autonomous in general, so that we will have more autonomous products, where you could think about robotics, but as well digital products. For example, we're looking at a technology of a self-evolving website or apps that would self-iterate on where to place a button and test on that, so circumventing traditional user research and prototyping, or self-generating UX and UIs, like we've seen the demos with Gemini, for example. The technology is not there yet, but so we'll see a lot more autonomous products. We will see more autonomous agents, that we will all have our personal assistants that curate all of the options, what clothes we can buy based on our preferences, which restaurants we can go to, as well as then autonomous processes, which is then what we talk about for the new product development process, if you want, that will become more autonomous. And that's what we're effectively building with a couple of Fortune 500 companies at the moment.
So, but if you're saying autonomous, I'm trying to understand it. It's not per se that you think it will take over the process. It's at least that's how I see it, and maybe we share that, or maybe we don't. But how I see it is, I can understand the idea of full autonomy, full self-driving, like Elon Musk, and definitely now he's saying that people will get it for free. But I don't really expect personally to full autonomy to come here very quickly. I think it will be gradual, a lot more gradual than what we initially, or what a lot of people initially thought. I think a very nice way of looking at it is, we have the co-pilots right now. I also believe in the co-bots that will, like Figure and the Tesla bot, but in the way that so you have basically, you can put it on two axes, but you can also put it in a T profile as person. And what I mean with the two axes is complexity versus the capabilities that they can do. So you have what they can do, the amount of capabilities they have, and how good they are at a certain capability. And the better they are, the more autonomy they can have in a certain task. But today what we see is that they're very broad in what they can do. ChatGPT, it's insane what it can do. But the quality is, it's doubtful in some cases. It's good in others, but it's not. You can't give it autonomy today. It just makes too much mistakes. You need supervision. And what we see today is we've had GPT-4. Now we've had Claude 3. Maybe you've seen that, the Anthropic one, which is now getting quite popular. If you look at it, in numbers, in the benchmarks, it's not that crazy much better. But in the facts, it's just a little bit better. And therefore, it performs quite a lot better in the autonomy already in certain tasks. And that's the evolution I believe we'll see. But it will be very gradual. Is that the way that you expect it to happen? Or do you really believe that at some point, that innovation process, and at some point, with that I mean within 5 years or maybe 10 years, which is not that long off, it will just be innovation full autonomous?
Well, I'm thinking about a 2 to 3 year time frame.
Okay.
So my answer to that would be yes. I don't think that will happen very soon with incumbent companies, because there's, obviously a lot of legacy and obstacles to get to that. But I'm pretty sure that is what new startups in each of the industries will be doing. If already we're looking at Shein, for example, the controversial fashion company out of China, they launch 1,000 products per day, every single day. That's absolutely insane if you look at it. But that is because they're actually pretty close to at least a semi-autonomous process, where they identify new trends through social listening, come up with new concepts of fashion, garments, clothes, apparel, jewelry, etc. And then they launch it straight into their D2C webshop. And obviously it's helpful that they're vertically integrated, so they control the whole process. And then the biggest unlock of what they've been able to achieve is that they've shortened the time from a product concept being generated to it being produced, because you're still talking about a physical item.
But that's not
just 3 days.
Is that technology? How did they unlock that? That's not the AI part. That's having a huge factory.
Yeah. But you need to be vertically integrated, and that's what we're seeing with a lot of companies, is that in my mind, the hardest part won't actually be the technology, because basically everyone, well, I'm not going to say it's easy,
joking.
But it's easier in a way, and everyone has access to the world-class models. If you talk about Cloud 3 or GPT-4, etc., everyone has access to it for $20 a month. And there is almost no point in building your own technology. Bloomberg did it last year with Bloomberg GPT and spent $100 million on that. And 2 months later, it was outpaced by ChatGPT 4 on financial tasks. So there's not really a point in trying to outpace the big AI companies, but the biggest unlock will be in transforming your operating model around the technology, which is, for example, what a Shein has done. And I'm not advocating, by the way, just to finish that point, on copying the Shein model, because it does come with a lot of waste and a lot of secondary consequences that aren't necessarily better for society and planet.
That's
yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of waste in the whole Shein value chain. If you look at the numbers.
Yeah. So do you feel then that the vertical integration, that's a path for consumer products that will have a huge impact? Because it's linked. Okay, you say that technology is the easy. Well, it's easy and not easy, but coupling that with the vertical integration, or where do you see what's the two angles there?
Yeah, so it becomes more difficult to launch more products to market if you don't own the channel to the consumer, and we're only talking consumer products. For example, it will be possible for all of the consumer goods companies to potentially launch hundreds of products every day, but it's not that the shelf space in the store that we go to increases, at least not in the physical shelf space. So the company or the actors that own the shelf space, in a way, will definitely have an outsized advantage, in my mind, at least. So yeah, it's an important aspect of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
But maybe to give another example, what we could start seeing. I'm sure you've played around with AI music generators as well, and I'm not a music expert by any means, but they're actually pretty good. So I think we will soon start seeing AI generated songs that could easily go into Spotify's algorithm.
Work.
Yeah, you launch 1 million a day to small groups of listeners.
You basically believe a bit
in
in the how it's called, the age of abundance, where because it's so cheap to make stuff, basically we just launch, and what works picks up, what doesn't work.
So with the previous technology, the internet, the cost of distributing something kind of neared zero, and that has, well, obviously led to a whole digital transformation of many economies. Now the cost of generating something will start nearing zero. For example, a music song, but equally as well digital products, if you look at like what's being developed there. So indeed you will start seeing what I call a proliferation of new products coming to market, whether that's songs, whether that's videos, whether that's apps, whether that's even food and beverage items or clothes. And on the other hand, we will start having AI assistants that curate out of all of that overabundance of product offers, because that's clearly going to be too much for us as users and consumers to sift through. So in that sense, you're going to have an AI to AI kind of thing with exponentially more products flooding the markets and then being curated down. And a side trend of that, what I'm expecting is that in product development, we will start seeing product development for the AI assistants, maybe even more than for the actual human user behind it. And that maybe sounds a bit far-stretched, but it's the same what we've seen with SEO, search engine optimization, with blog posts and online content being written for Google's algorithm to score well in the algorithm, more than actually for the reader. and which is
so
a bad
we're going
thing.
to optimize for the assistants.
Yeah,
basically.
yes, I think that's in our space, like for the last decade, the whole talk has been about designing for the human user, and that's gonna remain very important, but we'll start to see a discipline in designing new products, whatever they are, for the AI assistants that curate that for the human users. Obviously, we don't have the AI assistants just yet, but in the next 2 years, I think we will all have them and trust them as well, making choices for us.
So what I basically hear then is, if I understand it well, a very important part of the innovation process is the divergence and convergence. Yeah. Is that one of those diamonds, you could say, will happen in the market? Well, that's basically, is that because that usually happens in companies because it's too expensive and they have to shield it and then they put it in the market, but now you're saying that will actually shift to the market.
Well, there's two scenarios. So now we talked about that one, which is basically the Shein inspired in-market validation model, and you only produce what actually gains traction. And then the other model is more advanced simulation, which is actually what we're working on with most companies, because most companies don't want to take the risk
of putting it in
potentially, for example, Shein did have jewelry with a swastika symbol all of a sudden in their web shop because there was no human curation, which we would never advocate for, by the way. So even in like an autonomous scenario, we would advocate for human curation. But the other scenario is more advanced simulation. For example, so typically you validate new product ideas on 3 elements. One is desirability. Do users desire the solution you're developing? Viability, is it economically viable? What's the pricing, etc.? And feasibility, can we make the thing for that price? So now we're building simulators to basically evaluate a new idea on these 3, and we're most advanced in desirability. So where we test ideas against synthetically modeled or AI modeled consumer audiences.
So you say ChatGPT, you are a woman with 3 kids and you blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and then would you like this product?
Yeah, for some companies, we have predefined personas of the target audiences that they target. So they're all built into the model, and it automatically, so it generates hundreds of new ideas, and then it tests them against those, and then it also plugs into, and then the next step is testing with actual consumers.
So there was a study that verified that it's quite good at actually those personas compared to reality. It's not just something that it's not something that you tried, but it's proven that it works.
Yeah, so there are scientific studies that multiple that are now validating that LLMs are really good at impersonating certain audiences. Not all around the world. So obviously, because a lot of the training data has been based on English or etc. So there are some, but it's validated for a large part of the world, I would say. And also
that
empirically.
Means concretely, minority groups are then harder to work on. Is that how I should see it?
Yes.
Because they're less presented in the data.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we should be very mindful of. But you could argue that is the same with actual consumer testing. So you have the same risks of bias in both that we should be very mindful of and counter. But not maybe just to tap on that, not in a way that, for example, Gemini did recently. I'm sure you've seen the pictures as well of how they try to unbias their text-to-image model, and then when you asked it to make a visual of the founding fathers of the US or Nazis back in the 1940s, you get racially diverse people, which obviously is not accurate. So you see AI models struggling with how to unbias their systems, and
the people making the AI models are struggling with it.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so it's validated to work both in terms of the scientific studies, and also we've empirically validated it by running it against the AI model consumer panels, as well as against actual consumer panels and then compare the two in some of our projects.
Does that mean that your clients are now ready to say, let's drop the real consumer panels? Or is that, is that where you think it will go? Or what's the value of it today? Is it testing now and learning and seeing if it works, and then in the future we might do products without it? Or how do you...
So to your first question, are currently the Fortune 500 companies willing to let go of actual consumer testing? No. It might go there, but at the moment, definitely not. What it unlocks is that typically you can only, let's say, generate 10 ideas and then test them against consumers. Now it allows us to generate hundreds or thousands of ideas. So basically you can exponentially...
You have an extra filter, and therefore you can go bigger first.
And then you can actually get to the best 10 and then feed them into actual user testing, which we also do in an AI or a semi-autonomous way. So we're using systems like Outset, for example, that based on a direction that you give it, would take those ideas and have interviews with actual consumers. So last time we did it for a project, and we did 200 interviews over the weekend where none of us were present, and got really good results and insights out of that.
And a year ago you had to do that
all manually, and that was weeks of work.
Days of work, weeks of work, and then now you do it overnight.
Yeah. And so to maybe zoom back out again, that's how each step of the whole innovation and product development process, if you want, becomes more autonomous, not fully autonomous as of today.
And if you do that, then so you go from 1,000 ideas, you have ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, filter basically a first step. You go from 1,000 to 10.
Yeah.
Do the consumers then still... Because at some point, I would think those 10 are maybe equally good to consumers. Like, do you still see clearly then this is the better idea? Do you understand what I mean? Because if you have 10 which are from very wide, but you already zoomed in, they might already be very equal in their comparison.
Yeah, that's the way you program the engine to deliver that. So on the innovation engines or the autonomous innovation engines, we are building at the moment. So we A/B tested with a couple of them, taking the best tested concepts from the last 2 years, and then the ones that are now being generated by the AI engines. We've done that in food and beverage, we've done that in fashion, we've done that in industrial industries as well, because we've mostly talked about consumer now. And they come in on par at the moment. So they're not better, but they're definitely not worse either.
Okay.
But the difference is that in the traditionally generated ones, there were like tens of millions invested in them, and a lot of time, typically months, invested into coming to them. And now they're generated in minutes. And it's fully programmed on the brand identities of the brands we're doing it for, the consumer audiences, etc., etc.
That's a huge change. Is there already something in the market?
No. So it's too soon to say that the products in the market will be better.
It's not like what was it, Coca-Cola or Pepsi or the AI generated?
The year 3000. I guess the products that we've seen in the market, like autonomous bags from ABI, the year 3000 from Coca-Cola, for example, I would qualify them more as learning projects, mostly as PR and marketing projects. I think the interesting thing is really building a new enterprise capability where you can have an always-on engine of innovation that continuously listens and interprets all of the world's data, social listening, sales data, etc., generates new product ideas, tests them, and basically gives you the option to launch new products. And I don't... all of those, the year 3000 project, etc., are one-off projects. There's nothing bad with that, but for us, the unlock is really building the new enterprise capability.
You're now, if I hear it well, you're now at the stage where you've, with some clients, tested it. You see that it's on par. Your business will be completely different in the next coming years then? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, so
or the innovation business tout court?
Yeah, so it's super interesting for us as well, because obviously we're doing that work with our clients, but at the same time, our own business is completely transforming. So if I compare to a year ago, half of our current revenue is around autonomous innovation,
in 1 year,
where that was zero a year ago. So it's going super fast, and literally some of the business cases, like we just pitched one to a CFO of a top 3 consumer goods company globally. Literally, the business case has a line item on how much money they will save on innovation consultancy, which is us. So we're basically programming our own obsolescence in terms of some of the old work that we do. I don't think some of the more strategic work, growth strategy work, I think will remain primarily done by...
Why? Because there's less data? Because there's more uncertainty? Or...
Yeah, I think higher degrees of uncertainty, more complexity in general, more like stakeholders to manage, less repetitive nature. For example, you only create one growth strategy typically per year or even on a longer time frame, whereas, as I said, those companies develop hundreds of new products every year, so it's more of an automated pipeline type of thing. And I think also in the end, it's, well, at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be humans making the decisions, and I think they will still own the strategy setting, and it will be AI powered and infused, but I don't think that's going to a more autonomous level anytime soon for big companies, not for small ones.
I read a paper, but I think I read a paper a few weeks ago, and actually it basically said that do you see a trend in when the capability of a large language model increases, the capability of predicting the future, also literally assumption-based predictions, like this is where the market will go, which is often a part of a growth strategy. You need to predict where it will go to, and that they're actually already on a level that's higher than most people. I wouldn't say innovation consultants are people that do it on a daily basis, but that it becomes possible to, in that vagueness, already find trends and do predictions, which are relatively accurate, which is, to your point, maybe something that will change in the next few years as well then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any type of knowledge work will become at least AI powered. So we've defined 5 levels of towards full autonomy, if you want, from human only to autonomy, and AI powered is the middle level. And I think all knowledge work will definitely be there very soon, if it's not there already.
And you say all knowledge work, you don't see it broader? I see it.
Yeah.
I think it will happen everywhere. I think people are still underestimating the impact. Definitely, if you see the trend of generative AI, which is now becoming more an interactive version of AI. It's not just generating stuff anymore. Right? It's really communicating. It gives you information. You give it information. It can become proactive even in what it can do. It's evolving in multimodality. Its capabilities are evolving. So in the digital world, it's becoming a lot stronger. But we see at the same time the embodied AI is how they call it, or the robotics, or whatever you want to call it. But figure Tesla, the Optimus, and actually those two will converge quite quickly. You've already seen it with Figure and OpenAI, which is nice now because in the back end it's probably just APIs stitched together and they communicate, which is not the real intelligence yet. But what becomes very interesting is at the point where you have the embodied AI, so robots, and they can learn from reality. Today, every AI system still learns from what you could call second order data. It's still all like text today. It's basically very bad source of facts because we wrote it down and we suck basically at writing things down. The information quality is not that high and density is not high either. Now you see with the images and videos, the information, like an image says 1,000 words. That's what we see. But if robots can act in this world and learn from the prediction that they make, that they predict this is glass, but it's plastic when they touch it, they'll learn from that. Then we'll see a shift that it will go through every layer of whatever we do.
Yeah, it's a good point. But, I guess to my point, I think the fact that it's impacting knowledge work is actually a newer phenomenon. I think in the past, like the last decade, a lot of the talk was that
mechanical automation is something we're used to.
Primarily impacted blue collar work. And now I think everyone in white collar knowledge work kind of faces the moment as well. Like, okay, if I'm an accountant, if I'm a designer,
as white collar, we're safe.
Yeah, and what we're seeing now is that actually it's going faster there. Already, if you looked at the first numbers on Upwork, for example, a platform where you can contract freelancers, we've already seen that the demands for copywriting have gone down 40% in the last year.
I didn't know.
Obviously, there have been new requests around AI prompting, etc. So you see a shift. But I think copywriting is the first one that's being impacted, and we will start seeing the same across design. Obviously, we've seen a lot of use cases in customer service, chatbots, and companies wanting to save there. I think that's not using enough of the imagination of what's possible. I think that's too focused on just efficiency. And to your other point of embodiment, I think we've seen big evolutions in there as well. For example, last week on NVIDIA's big conference with the
7 humanoids.
Yeah, the generative robotics 003 or Groot for the fans of Guardians of the Galaxy. And the advancement on indeed robots being able to learn in the real world as well as in simulated worlds, and basically just learning from watching you do something. And then obviously the interesting thing is that easily you can just copy that to 1,000 robots if you want.
So and they can learn from each other.
It's just extremely scalable. So we will both see it indeed on like the digital world as well as in the physical world. And
but if you talk to the CFO then of that company or whatever, do you feel that they understand that this is going not just fast but lightning fast and what's coming? And are they ready for it? And can they cope with it?
Well, I don't think anyone is super ready for it in general. Maybe if we bring it back to like how does this transform enterprises and current companies, my advice would be towards people in that environment is to look beyond efficiency gains. I think now 95%, if not 99%, of all of the investment in AI transformation within big companies is in making the current processes more efficient and save money and time. So that's looking at like how can we do this step in the invoicing better and faster, this step in the innovation
process
faster. That as well, like it all starts from there. And I don't think that's gonna unlock the real value. And
why not?
It's what happens every time. Like when we have a new technology, for example, when internet and digital was the latest new technology, the first newspaper was basically a PDF version of the physical one, rather than reimagining like can we have personalized news streams based on your preferences, on what you're
what we're used to now.
What we're used to now. So that's a lot of what we try to bring, like looking beyond efficiency gains towards what is an AI native operating model and what are AI native consumer experiences. And maybe just to give one example of that in the consumer tech space, we've seen the Humane AI pin. So for the listeners that haven't seen that, so that's a pin that you will put here, and that basically
on your chest
becomes a co-pilot that sees and hears everything that you do and gives you advice, can translate.
It's a bit like Rewind. If you've seen that, they have a pendulum. It's not the pendulum recording everything.
Exactly. And that to me is like reimagining, like not starting from the current smartphone, but reimagining what would be an AI native experience in that industry.
I think that's true. I think we need that. You have Rabbit as well, which also is very cool, which is really trying to reinvent the phone, as in you talk to it. It doesn't have apps anymore even. You just get what you need. But that's startups.
Yeah.
I think that's the potential now for startups to reinvent what we've been doing. But as an incumbent, I understand why you're saying it, but I'm not sure if it's realistic and if you're leveraging your strengths then, because your strengths are your distribution, are your size, are your market you already have, and trying to do something completely new in that, I haven't seen a lot of successful companies doing that.
No.
Because it's just extremely hard. It's you have the big tanker story and all of these kind of stuff. I'm not per se a fan of it, but it is true that if you have a current process and way of working, making it more efficient gives you more competitive, it makes you competitively stronger. But just putting a new product into it, how do you combine those two?
So I totally hear you, and I can echo from doing this over a decade that it is incredibly hard. I think we can learn a lot from like the last wave of digital transformation. So a lot of that, like the focus was also on efficiencies. If we look at like some of the industry defining shifts that we've seen, for example, Netflix in media streaming, HelloFresh in meal delivery, Teladoc in telemedicine. To your point, like they've been driven by new players into the space rather than by incumbents. And some of the incumbents, like Blockbuster in the Netflix example, have gone bankrupt. Like those stories are well known. And I think we're on the stepstone of a new wave of transformation that in my mind is going to be even bigger than the digital one. So in each industry, if you're not going to look at what those AI native solutions would be and match that with, for example, the existing distribution and scale that you have, because that could be a winning combination, then there might be the Netflix of the AI wave or the HelloFresh or Teladoc of the AI wave that does it for you. So I don't think it's necessarily something you can ignore. It's very difficult to do it within the walls of the existing company. So it's best to do that as a separate unit. We've seen the same, for example, with electric vehicles in the automotive industry. Obviously, we've all seen Tesla as a new entrant. And then some companies have done it within their current structure, and it's not undoable. But you see others like Volvo having Polestar as a sister brand, Renault doing similar things. Sometimes it's easier to do it under a sister brand that then you can develop as something truly, in this case, AI native, or in that case, EV, electric vehicle native. So that would be an operating model to do it.
I think we don't share the entire same vision there, because from what I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think an incumbent, a large company should focus on their strengths, which is scale, which is distribution. It's a very large part of it. I think they should look, and that's things that we help them with. It's understanding what's your value chain, where are AI use cases that can fit in, what's your maturity, and then even depending on conjuncture or choosing what their strategy is it an efficiency use case, is it an innovation use case, or is it more customer experience use case, and then depending on where they are at, we focus on that, and then you have the whole value effort, kind of all of those things. But I think that's what personally, I think that's good that they're doing that. Not per se just on efficiency, also on what they do it better in terms of customer experience or innovation. But the real disruption, you could call what you're saying. If you see Polestar is struggling, they're struggling. It's just, and the main reason why I think all of these things have a hard time is because the only way you can do that is through speed. It's through learning cycles. It's through progress. It's through making shit happen, doing stuff. And that's not what, and doing stuff with taking risks, it means making mistakes. It's like OpenAI made mistakes, and it's acceptable because it's OpenAI. The way that Microsoft now invested in OpenAI, leverages it, that's a great example of how it can work, but you need something external that has no control, no boundaries, and can focus really on speed. And I think that's, I haven't seen, or not a lot at least, leaderships that have the stamina and the guts to do that, but also combining it with the brand, because if you link Polestar and Volvo too much, if Polestar makes a mistake in their process, which will happen, it reflects back on Volvo, which should be a stable brand, which should be credible, which is big, and you can't hurt that. So,
yeah. I'm with you, and I'm not advocating that we shouldn't
the corporate
optimize
venturing,
the existing.
Let's build something within the company, and I don't see that really working well.
It's very difficult. I'll admit that, and I think 95% of the work should be on developing the current better, and that's efficiency gains as well as evolving towards a more AI native operating model in our world for innovation. So that's transformation. And I would advocate to spend like 5 or 10% of the investment on looking at the breakthrough. And it's not that AI is gonna fully transform, well, it's gonna impact every industry, but not necessarily
overnight.
shift it that current incumbents will go bankrupt, but you wouldn't want to be caught off guard and being the next blockbuster to use or to stay with that example. But it's definitely like a 90% versus 10% thing. But we advocate for a portfolio approach across both efficiency, adjacent innovation, and then breakthrough innovation.
Interesting, because I think you see these things. I have the feeling that the market is maturing a bit in understanding that in the last 10 years, basically your business, that you're cracking the code, or you're understanding how it can become repeatable. Do you think that's a recipe on a meta level that will more or less stay the same? Or do you expect to really see a shift there as well?
On a meta level, I wouldn't see that. And by the way, there are examples of big organizations that have done that successfully in digital. For example, Amazon has obviously started at selling books, etc. But their most thriving business is AWS, which is now powering a lot of the current cloud computing.
Why do you believe that they succeeded at that?
Well, I wasn't there at the table, so that I can't give you the inside story, but obviously Jeff Bezos has always adopted this day one approach, always day one. That's also the name of their headquarters, literally. So always having a beginner's mind and basically always retaining that startup mindset that you mentioned.
It's like a quote I heard from about Satya Nadella. The comparison from Steve Ballmer to Satya Nadella is like from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture.
Yeah.
It's basically the same. That's
Yeah, and to your point, you need that if you want to be successful at doing something really new. Otherwise, there is no point. If you don't have the culture and operating model for it, it's gonna die anyways, and then you might as well not bother. By the way, there's always two routes. If you're looking at disruption of industries, there's the route trying to build it yourself, which is what we were talking about, or you can also be fully aware of the potential disruption that's coming, and be on the watch out to acquire companies, which is, for example, what Meta and Facebook did. They didn't really evolve Facebook all that much, but they acquired Instagram and WhatsApp whenever they became too big, and now they kind of seized the market. So that's obviously another valuable approach you can take.
Yeah. You were saying your business is also heavily impacted with it. So the market, your business, you see this new wave coming. Back to the original, where is the autonomy? Do you see on the longer run? How do you see it? Do you really think that because the Sam Altman, for instance, said will be the first $1 billion solopreneur company? Do you believe that? Do you think that's possible? I struggle with it because it feels like if everybody has the same means, it becomes a commodity. So then everybody's competing with it. Why can one person do all of that value? Do you understand what I mean? It doesn't rhyme with that in my mind.
Well, nobody knows, but my best guess would be yes.
We're learning, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So my answer would be yes. And actually, for example, at the summit, we will have 3 speakers speaking about exactly that, building autonomous companies or autonomous ventures, which is super interesting. We've seen 2 weeks ago Devin being launched. So Devin launched by Cognition Labs, which is the world's first AI software engineer. Obviously, we could already code with
Maybe elaborate a bit, because I'm not sure if it's already well known.
Yeah, so let me just say what it does. So it's an evolution from, we can already do coding with ChatGPT or with the GitHub Copilot and all these kind of tools, but that's more in a Copilot tool. So that's in an AI-powered way in terms of our levels of autonomy. What Devin takes it to is to an autonomous level. So what is Devin? It's an AI agent, basically, what we would call an autonomous agent. And you basically give it a goal, and it would start creating its own tasks. So rather than talking to ChatGPT, could you give me this, and then it gives you an answer, you need to prompt it again, etc., etc.
Basically, multiple LLMs talking to each other.
Yeah, and so what for example, I saw a couple of experiments with it. Ethan Mollick asked it to, like, hey, could you, and then we're linking it back to the autonomous company in a way. Could you go on Reddit and actually start a software coding business or side business? It said, yes, why don't I do that? So it's very conversational, and you see it starting to create its own actions for that. So, okay, I need to log on to Reddit, I need to find the right subreddits, I need to make a post, I need to define my price that I'm going to charge for my coding activities, and then I need to follow up on requests, etc. And then it starts executing fully autonomously. So it goes on Reddit, it meets the CAPTCHA field, it just, takes care of that as well. It finds a couple of subreddits, it makes a human written post, it charges it decides to charge $100 for its services. And then it reports back like, hey, I've already done this, now I'm waiting for answers. So it gives us, and it's basically a bit of an evolution of like baby AGI and AutoGPT that we've seen like six months ago or so. This is way more functional than those systems. I've played around with a couple of that. And that gives us a hint of a more, you could easily see if that were to work, that you could actually have a side business that just earns money for you.
Maybe two questions. So when did it fail? Do you have because it fails, that's a certainty.
Yeah, well, so this experiment that I was describing on Reddit, like the guy that did the experiment, because it's not open access yet, so I haven't had the opportunity to experiment with it myself, because usually these things launch in the US, unfortunately.
And the new rules won't help?
Yeah, no, that's true as well. But he pulled it down before people were actually charged for money, because he just thought, well, this is gonna go a bit too far for me. But you see someone else that asks it to code an entire game with it. So it fully codes the game for you, and then you would just ask it, oh, can you make that a bit more colorful? Can you make that a bit more dynamic in terms of gameplay, etc.? Obviously, it's still a fairly basic game, but it seems to be a lot more functional and actually not break at those tasks given than the likes of AutoGPT and Baby AGI in the past.
So let's say, okay, it's already at a decent level of creating stuff. But then at the other point, if you have access, if everyone and the people here have access to it, we can all ask the same questions, make a game. Why? So that 100 euros now is 100 euros because it's compared to what people cost today. If everybody has access to it, that price will drop dramatically because we just have the same tools. We won't go to a subreddit and pay someone $100 if we can just have access to Devin ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. How will that lead? How do you think that will lead to that $1 billion? Just because there will be one person who can be marginally better than the rest and stretch that further and scale it faster?
Yeah, I think there, like previous technologies, for example, if you look at, I don't know, TikTok influencers or whatever, like all of us have access to that as well. But then there's a couple of people that succeed in having an outsized impact using that new technology and then get tens of millions of followers and make a business out of that. It's maybe an anecdotal example, but I think we will all have access to the similar technology, but some will just be better at making an outsized impact out of it than others. And I don't think we fully know yet what those maybe character traits or skill sets will be
For the people that
actually become the future unicorns.
Because to your point, I do agree with there are no, and if embodied AI is there are no, at least in the digital world, no there's no borders anymore. You can do everything, you can scale it, you can put it online, everybody can have access. So if you're really good and you're faster than anyone else, there's no limits. In that sense, I do agree with it.
Let's say that, for example, in the music industry, I think people will still be very attached to, I want to have an artist with a DNA.
That's what you see as well, right? The concerts are the things that they get money for because they want to see the person.
But at the same time, we already see a lot of digital influencers that are now basically AI personas, but they do have a personality that people want to follow. But that means that there is a person behind the scenes that basically steers what those personalities are. So let's say that that's something that you're amazingly good at, and you create 1,000 virtual artists or virtual bands or virtual influencers or whatnot that all have their own style. You can have an outsized impact, and one person might be really good at it, and I would for sure be really bad at that. Because that's just not really my strength.
I was going to say, I'm assuming, and not sure if I should say it now, but I'm assuming that people with a lot of empathy will be great at it if you can judge really well how others will react to it.
Yeah, I just wouldn't see myself being good at, I don't know, designing pop stars or creating pop stars, or I don't think that's a skill set of mine. But just to like make the point of like, I would have access to the technology, but I just wouldn't be good at making something out of it, whereas someone else might have 1,000 virtual music bands.
You need to like
in
it
the
as
future.
well. I think there's not a lot of people who will like it because it's not your person anymore. You're like your person, or you're behind your computer doing everything from behind the computer.
It's more gonna be a creative technologist maybe than a traditional music artist that will do that.
That will be a huge shift. Interesting. So basically you believe in the first solopreneur unicorn?
Yes.
Yeah. When will we see it?
2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
That's fast. So what you're saying is, and people are already trying it now? That's obvious.
Said, like at the summit, we'll have 3 speakers talking about
and they're trying it.
Yeah, they're doing it right now. There's one guy literally called the AI Solopreneur who makes a whole thing out of it. The other one, I talked to him this week, and he said our mission is to create 100,000 autonomous companies. And look, we should probably also talk about like what the influence and the impact all of this that we talked about is going to have on society, because I don't think that's all going to be good, but maybe we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, there's literally people working on exactly that at the moment.
Yeah, and that's indeed the risk I see, is that the polarization will just increase. We already see now that people with access to means and higher education, the shift is already increasing. This kind of technology probably won't help. How do you see that?
That's a good point. So I think what we will see maybe as a first wave is democratization. Like we've seen, and I'm gonna again use an example of from the digital transformation wave. So for example, or where we're currently at, taxi driving has become accessible to many people because of Uber. The same with Airbnb for renting, etc.
Lawyers become very affordable. Now we'll have a lawyer to read because nobody does that. If you have the small letters for your energy bill, nobody reads that. But the moment the lawyer costs you $2 to just do that, you'll do that. Yeah,
so it will become democratized at first, but then I think a lot of it will become automated, which is where the real societal struggle starts, if you want. And to use that example of taxi driving, so now we're in the Uber stage, the democratized state, if you want. Anyone can get into it, but then soon we'll start to be seeing self-driving taxis, which we're already seeing in San Francisco, etc. So you get to an automated state, which is then actually, no human driving the car, anymore. So I think that's a wave that we will see. And although we will see like in my mind, the 1 billion unicorn solopreneur companies,
which you could argue is actually for people that don't have access to means, is possible to do as well. It will be a lot more on a personal level, like personal intellect and personal stamina, and will you work hard for it, than that you are dependent on the context.
Yeah, I think that just talking about maybe that Bloomberg example. So that's a big company investing 100 million in developing their proprietary model, only to find out that it's worse than what anyone can buy for $20 per month. Which is pretty insane, because that means that everyone around the world, obviously with internet access and the ability to spend $20 a month, so that's not everyone in the world, but a lot of people have access to the best-in-class technology, which might be a first time in history that actually, and obviously ChatGPT kind of entered the market with that model. We could have seen a future as well where actually the best LLMs would be introduced in corporations first, while not being accessible to the broader audience. And in a way, because of what ChatGPT did, it's now become democratized in terms of access. Having said that, the access is democratized. I still think it's going to lead to more concentration of capital.
Right.
Especially with the big tech firms that are running all of these models.
They are actually the ones owning it.
Yeah, I think they will start to grow even bigger and penetrate even more market sectors, etc.
Yeah, I think there's, if you extrapolate that, you could even think there would be 5 large companies left in the world, because if they have access to all the cognitive power and to all the machine labor like robots, then what's left?
There is a scenario that we might be trending in that direction, and maybe not even all 5. And obviously they've already started making their plays into, for example, becoming a healthcare company, etc., and not just being in tech. So to your point, from a societal point of view, there's a clear risk that some of us might be without jobs. Or because of all the efficiency gains, that the even more power shifts to the big corporates and especially big tech companies, and we become even more concentrated there. And unfortunately for us in Europe, I guess they're all in the US as well, apart from the ones in China developing their models.
As I said, you could argue at the same time that because of the democratization, individuals will have a lot more means, so in a way that will allow everyone to try things out. It of course, if you're not exposed to it, if you don't get access to it, that's a different thing, but because it's a very pessimistic view in a certain way. It's like we're going to the almost a doom scenario where that's my last question, so keep your real doom scenarios for in a few minutes. But personally, I understand why you're saying that, but at the same time, I think a lot more things will become a lot more accessible. So as I said, like a lawyer today, it's expensive. Normal. If you don't use it to scan your energy contract, or when you buy a car, you usually don't read all the small letters. If because of technology that costs you €10 or $10 or whatever, you might use them. The demand will increase a lot. I don't think that we're at the point where any legal firm will let it go completely to a autonomous bot, and I would argue probably should never do that, purely because of liabilities and all of these things. So, but then they will need a lot more people in smaller tasks to do that. So we'll have a lot more. We also see that the world of entertainment is growing a lot because of that, because people have more time to do these kind of things and get money. Like influencers 20 years ago, okay, there were famous people, but there's the amount of influencers these days and how much money they own with it. It's insane. these kinds of things, the market will shift to these things as well, and will allow for influencers. You can come from everywhere and start doing that and work on it. And there's not a lot of things that hold you back for trying. And I think the entertainment market will grow a lot, and everything like sports, every sport is becoming a lot more popular. You can see also in a macroeconomic, the big private equities are really investing in all of these things because, and I do think it's right that those markets will increase. They'll need a lot of people there as well. So to put a bit of, how do you see that? Do you really think we'll come to a point where we'll need a universal basic income, basically? That's where, or do you think that will solve itself?
Now we got to the question. So there's
let's keep the real dystopian and utopian part away.
Yeah, we're getting to it, I guess. Again, I don't think anyone knows, so I don't want to proclaim to know it either. Definitely not. I think there's first of all two perspectives to look at it. The one is, we've always had these kind of doom scenarios with previous technology breakthroughs that it would replace work. And to use one anecdotal example, it's not because we got spreadsheets. In the beginning, they said we won't have accountants anymore. It's just the role of accountants has evolved. Or there's the second perspective, and I'm a bit more on that side of the spectrum, but definitely not entirely, is that this is a new type of technology breakthrough because it's the first time that we're developing an autonomous intelligence in the digital as well as the physical world, to your point, and that it might be different this time around. I definitely don't think it's going to go super fast because
no singularity or kind of explosion.
I don't think, large parts of the world will be unemployed in the next 2 years. I don't think from an organizational, societal point of view, it's going to go that fast. But even a trend in that direction might cause us with issues. So then to your point about universal basic income, I think there's actually 2 points of concern. And people focus most on the money part, but at least equally important to me is the happiness part. And I'll come to both. So I think we do need to think about universal basic income, or at least prepare scenarios if that's the direction that we're going to. The issue with that would be can you reap the economic benefits from all of the automation and things becoming more autonomous and funnel that to universal basic income, or would all of those profits be captured by those 5 big tech companies? And then, that's one thing to clarify, but I think it's valuable to work that out. But then the second one, which in my mind is not talked about enough, is that there's a clear link between people being happy in their lives and having a fulfilling job, having something to do during the day. And there's been a couple of studies about people, typically unemployment leads to unhappiness, and unhappiness leads to a whole lot of other societal problems that nobody wants. Is for example, people that have a religious role, like rabbi or imams, etc. They don't have, or people just studying religions. They typically don't have a job, but they have a fulfilling way to spend their day reading holy books, etc. So those groups have been studied to actually have similar happiness levels to people having a fulfilling job without being paid for that day activity, if you want. And now I would assume the religious part is not for everyone. So we'll need to understand what that is, and what else those meaningful day activities could become if it's not a paid-for job, if you want. So my main point is we should look at the money side, universal basic income, but also at the happiness and fulfillment side.
So your projection is that we'll come to a point where technology will become that autonomous that there will be large parts of unemployment. That's.
Well, I started off with I don't know. I think it's a likely scenario, and I think it would be smart to at least prep for the scenario before all of a sudden it would happen. Because like our whole economy and all entities within an economy are organized to continuously seek efficiencies. So a scenario that I wouldn't see is like what Elon Musk at some point argued for: let's stop the development of AI or the adoption. I think it's going to continuously push forward just by how our societies and economies are organized. Like countries are always looking for GDP growth. All the companies within that are always looking for growth. And obviously there is a whole degrowth movement. But there is value in the arguments, but I just don't see the system changing fundamentally or who would drive that change. So yeah, it's definitely the evolution I see.
So that's your dystopian future, or can you go a step further?
Well, yeah, there's other dystopian futures that are being talked about of AGI. Well, potentially, doing stuff. For example, there's the classical example: I need to save the planet, so let's eliminate all humans. That type of thinking, maybe that's a bit too far stretched for me at the moment. Although I do think we should consider it as a serious risk, because otherwise we might not mitigate against it and we might end up there. Now, if you combine the two things that we've just seen in the last 2 weeks, one is that Devin autonomous agent that I was talking about, that just makes up its own tasks based on the goal it has and executes against them. And then we've seen the evolution at NVIDIA and others in robotic space. If you combine the two, it's not fully unrealistic without me understanding all of the technicalities. But if you just look at the trends where it's going, even that Devin AI agents, which is real right now, if you were to ask it not to set up a side business on Reddit or program a game, but if you were to ask it, can you scam 1 million people for me, it would, if there are no guardrails, it would just start doing that. And rather than logging on the Reddit forums, start emailing people, calling people, whatever, in probably a pretty smart way. So there is clear risks as the moment. So right now we're at the moment of generative AI, where AI is able to generate new text, image, video, etc. We're now on the border of AI being able to taking action, both in the digital world as well as in the physical world. And I think that's where the danger is. If it generates content, there are dangers to that as well, misinformation and
but there's still a personal. There's a limit to it because there's a person in between.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't take action on our behalf, but as soon as we give it the mandate to take action, which is what's going to happen in the next year, that's where the danger is.
The action space should be limited. Then that's what you're saying. We need to to clearly define what's the action space of these tools.
Yes.
Yeah. But at the same time, what you could say is that there are rules already. There are laws that say that scamming and phishing and all of these things, they're not allowed. They are already. I understand we can do it at a different scale. That's a big difference. But it's still illegal.
Yeah.
How do you think that there's just because of the scale, the impact will increase? That's
because basically what we were talking about, democratization of also applies to that. So it basically becomes accessible to any individual in the world to set up, I don't know, to use that anecdotal example, it's probably not the best one, to set up a scamming campaign towards the whole population if you want.
But at the same point, we'll have, I'm trying to, I understand it, but if you look at it, you'll have AI on the good side as well, filtering out the scams and saying this is potentially because spam filters are improving a lot, all of these things. So we're fighting with the same means in a certain way. And I hope today, I'm positive that actually OpenAI and all of these things are on the positive side, and we have more means today than the bad actors.
Y- yeah, I would hope so. In general, I'm a pragmatic optimist. But you did ask me about potential dystopian futures, so that's what we're talking about. I think we should just be aware of the potential risks, and I guess something, for example,
So what you're saying is these risks, we should be aware of them, and think of how we will mitigate them in case they would happen. That's your point.
Because and it's a super anecdotal example, but one that I gave earlier about Gemini and the people at Google trying to actually do something for the
and
good.
they went too far, basically.
We want to have, when it generates images, we want them to be racially diverse and diverse on all aspects. But so those are some of the smartest people and the best AI experts in the world working at Google. And they didn't foresee that
would be the outcome.
That would be the outcome. And that's a very minor thing. But like, what if we're in the space of AI taking actions, which is what we'll get into the next year, and those same smart people program it with all good intentions, but it ends up at an unintended consequence. I do think we will see examples of that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I end with the question, but I'll end with another one, actually. So I have two questions left. I end with the utopian versus dystopian. What's your utopian future? What do you see if we manage this well? Where are we going?
It's a good question. A couple of thoughts on that. The first one is, I think it's important that we look at AI not for, I don't know, copywriting our emails better, but how can we leverage it to actually solve the real problems in the world? Like, that would be the core element
Healthcare,
of my utopian
education,
future. Like, and we're already seeing examples of that with, for example, AlphaFold creating exponentially more protein structures. If you apply the same to medicine and developing cancer treatments, we've seen the same in material science with DeepMind's algorithm actually generating hundreds of thousands times more potential materials that we would be able to use for real world problems. So I think that should be our focus. I'm not entirely sure that's currently where most of the investment is going, but I would be hopeful that we can leverage the more autonomous technologies to solve actual problems in the world and advance ourselves on that. Then secondly, and maybe I'll leave it at those two, I would hope it would contribute in the end to us being collectively happier. Because if there's one thing that's probably has frustrated me about the last decades of economic development, is that we've all become richer and kind of are in this pursuit of internal progress that we think is amazing. But like, what is it for? We've not collectively become happier, and there's even like clear trends amongst teenagers, for example, and I know we both have kids that soon will become teenagers, that they're actually collectively unhappier with social media, smartphones, and technology that we introduced. And to me, that should be more of a focus than it is today.
Yeah, I'd love to dive deeper, but we'll have to take the time into account. But I have one final question, and you actually already launched it. How will you prepare yourself and your family for it? Have you thought about that?
Maybe not as much as I have to, because I've kind of been primarily focused on preparing my company and our clients on it. Maybe let me first start with an anecdote, because I have an 8-year-old daughter, and how they look at these new technologies, and then maybe start from there. So last year we were camping through Norway, and we were going on a hike.
Mobile home?
Sorry?
Mobile home or tent? Or?
Yeah, a camper van.
Camper van, okay.
And we were doing a hike, and I had read like, hey, this is a resting place of a famous Viking king from back in the day. So I was telling my family, and she looked at me like, well, actually, we're Vikings. Was that a real thing? Or was that like Santa Claus and like invented mythical figures that she's now aware of. Yeah, I hope there's no kids listening. I would assume so. They'll probably have tuned out by now, I would assume. So I said yes, that was a real period in time in Norway and Sweden, etc. And she looked at me like, Dad, can I ask ChatGPT?
Really?
And so she basically questioned my parental, authority of me speaking the truth on the matter. And she kind of sees ChatGPT as a place that you go to if you really want to know the truth about something. So that in general, like I definitely, as a starting point, I let them test and learn with those new technologies and getting familiar with them. I try to explain what it does, etc. And I think that's a practical starting point, is just testing and learning on the new technologies. And it's super
basically
interesting.
What companies should do as well,
Yeah.
learning about it. Yeah.
And it's super interesting to see how they look at it, because that's basically just what they grew up with and what's going to be normal to them.
And before you continue, how do you, like, because there's a risk it's hallucinating, it's saying things which aren't necessarily true. Does she understand that? Can you explain that to her?
Yeah, so it's something that I've explained as well. Like this is what it does, and that's a risk of that. But you could equally say that of humans. If you were to ask the average human a question, a knowledge question, is you will get some wrong answers as well. And something else that I've learned of doing this with her is, so at some point she asked it, like, what are the 5 most difficult questions you can answer? And so it gave like, what is there life after death? What is the meaning of life, etc. And then she asked ChatGPT, like, can you now answer the questions for me? And what was actually pretty interesting is that the current LLMs, they do give diversity of perspective around difficult questions, whereas actually, and in some countries like the US more than others, the current media that you would normally go to for the truth are getting more and more polarized. So you kind of get a view on the world, but not a diverse view on the world. And for example, around the question, is there life after death, or what is the meaning of life? It gives, and I would encourage everyone to try it out. It gives a very like diverse perspectives answer. It says, well, there is no single answer on this. Some people that would believe this, that believe in science. So if some people that have a religious point of view would think about this, etc., etc. So I thought, so in my mind, it's actually not worse than if you were to ask a human that question, because you would probably get a very single-minded answer. So I'm not too worried about my kids experimenting with the technology from that perspective. Okay,
so your first step is experimenting?
Yeah. And then I guess the next big question for us all is like, what skills would they need to learn? Like what are professions of the future? But given like our kids are 8 and 6, that's not really where I've gone to yet, because I think by the time they have to make that choice in 10 years from now, the world will have evolved so much that I think that's a question to answer then. But that's obviously going to be a very important question for that generation.
Asking for pocket money?
Not really yet.
Because at that point you could say she'll look at how can I earn money using this.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe, but that's going to be an interesting question, and not just for all of the parents, obviously, but also for our whole educational system, and how do we educate people for what's next. And if that were to be a scenario, and it's not that I think necessarily that's the reality, but of massive unemployment, for example, then we would need to basically educate young people how to become happy, what we were talking about earlier, without having a day-to-day profession. And that's one scenario, and maybe not the most likely one, but there are some pretty fundamental questions about how we set the next generation up for success, basically, assuming we still matter as Homo sapiens, to get back to your dystopian point.
Well, let's say I'm still positive, and I think the way that I think your example of your daughter is really fundamental for our kids, but for our companies as well. I think that's what we need to do. They need to experiment. We need to guide them. And in 10 years, she'll say, Dad, I don't need your money. I'm a solopreneur. I have $1 billion. But I think I hope that everybody is getting access to these technology and learning and embracing it. And then in that path, I am very positive.
That's a great starting point, and I'm with you.
On that note, we can close. Thank you, Philippe.
Thank you so much.
It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more, don't hesitate to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for the next episodes of Future Forward, where we'll be unraveling the AI future, one expert at a time.